Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 112. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Monday, Steelers Nation. Hopefully everyone had a fun and safe and healthy Easter weekend. Dave, how you doing? Last night I went down the rabbit hole of rewatching old drafts. I turned on the 1998 NFL Draft. Did you guys know that Andre Wadsworth and Curtis Enis were the next big thing? What happened to those guys? It's a reminder that the NFL Draft is full of surprises.
Speaking of rabbit holes, did the Easter Bunny come see you over at your mom's house and put you out a nice basket and all?
Not that, but I got a home-cooked meal, and my favorite food is the one that I don't have to prepare. So I was very happy.
What did you eat?
Just a traditional ham. My mom makes really good sweet potatoes with like marshmallow in them, so that's really good. But just the typical Easter fix. And your dinner looked really good. You look like you were on the 5-star Ritz over there.
Yeah. My wife took care of me. Had a nice ribeye and some potatoes and all. And first ribeye I've had in several weeks. Obviously trying to watch a little bit of what I eat. But I mean, hey, it's Easter, right? And Masters weekend and just a nice weekend overall. So hope everybody listening had a pleasant weekend as well, too. We got a few things to talk about this morning. And plus it's a monumental day as the annual Alex Kozora What They Look For studies have started. And I don't know about the rest of people listening, but I really look forward to those.
Yeah, you're definitely the Todd Haley gift personified when it comes to the What They Look For study this year. Obviously could be a bit complicated by the partial new regime of Omar Khan and Andy Weidel, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Dave, we'll start off with on a more somber and serious note here. Yesterday, April 9th, was the one-year anniversary of Dwayne Haskins' death after being struck by a dump truck trying to cross a Florida highway. And as that, we were kind of mourning and remembering Dwayne Haskins late last night, initially tweeted by Ryan Clark. He said something to the effect of a civil suit and press release will be announced sometime soon regarding new information, new allegations over Haskins' death. That suit has been filed today, and so has the press release. And I'll pull up and just maybe read a partial bit of the actual press release. We're just getting this information before we jumped on the podcast here. I'm trying to find exactly might be the best place here, but it says, in quote, "Many questions remain as to why the truck driver did not avoid hitting Dwayne, given the high visible activity in the area before the impact and the fact that the other drivers did not hit Dwayne." Went on to later say in here, quote, "It is believed that Dwayne was targeted and drugged as part of a blackmail and robbery conspiracy. In fact, his highly expensive watch was stolen from him shortly before his death," end quote. And so we're just getting this information in. I have not seen the actual lawsuit information and copy there, just the press release. Obviously, very serious allegations here that, we can't speculate to all that much, but that is the word. A civil lawsuit has been or will soon be filed in relation to Dwayne Haskins' death.
Yeah, going to be interesting to read the finer details of that, man. Kind of bizarre the way at least the press release, is written up, and it's hard to, as you mentioned, it's hard to speculate about anything related to this, but it's not going to stop people from doing it, obviously, and. Here we are. I don't know. I guess there's limitations about when these things have to be filed, right? Within a year or something like that. Potentially, if it's a civil or something like that. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but much to my parents' probably disappointment. But going to be interesting to watch play it out. And it's bad enough that yesterday was the year anniversary of his death, and you obviously that needed to be mentioned and was worth kind of not reviewing, but just putting out there that it was, the actual time event, anniversary of it and all. And then now you have this come out the day after, the day after that. It just feels bizarre is the best word I have for it right now.
Yeah, it certainly was unexpected news. And again, we don't know what information they may have in terms of the law firm representing, Haskins' family. At least I presume that's, who's kind of, pushing forward the lawsuit here. So it's impossible for us to say, the veracity of these claims and what exactly they know that we don't. And that information, I assume, will eventually come to light here in this civil suit. I believe the suit is against the driver, but I'm not 100% sure who the actual person or group they're going after here, or if they're just trying to obtain more records, more information. I'm not quite sure. Again, maybe that information will come out whenever the civil suit is maybe officially filed and we get eyes on that. So as you said, Dave, it's hard to comment on these things. I want to be very careful with how we word it and just how we approach it, because we just don't know what we don't know right now. But obviously things are, serious allegations. Frankly, it may be difficult to try to prove it. But again, I don't know what information they have that may be kind of a big bombshell in this case.
Yeah, I wonder how many of the teammates that were down there training with them will be subpoenaed and, that kind of stuff there. So once again, not the kind of thing that you're going to wake up to on a Monday morning after Easter, right? Especially the day after the 1 year anniversary of his passing. But here we are.
Yeah, and we'll keep you posted. If more information comes to light, I assume we'll be talking about this periodically as this lawsuit moves through. Obviously, court systems, even civil suits, can take quite a long time to process, and it may be quite some time until this is resolved. But want to pass that information along because it was surprising and obviously really important news that's coming across here.
Right.
All right, Dave, make the transition here to the football world and some Easter Sunday news around the AFC North. Odell Beckham Jr., who I was pretty convinced was going to become a New York Jet. Even when I was reading the tweet announcing where he was signing, I was kind of filling in Jet in my own head until I read the whole thing. He's not going to New York. He's going to Baltimore with the Ravens, a 1 year deal worth up to $18 million. There are some incentives there, but the bulk of this is, signing bonus and, basically, real guaranteed money. And so Odell Beckham Jr. back in the AFC North.
$15 million guaranteed, supposedly. You would think that the way it being a 1 year deal or assumed to be a 1 year deal. Now there are, they don't have a lot of cap room to play with in Baltimore. And immediately after seeing the numbers of it, then double checking the NFLPA database and all like that, they don't have the cap space for that. Now, obviously, there might be some restructures that they could have done or cuttings or whatnot. But first thing that ran through my head was there is going to be some void years tacked on with this thing here to help lower his 2023 cap hit. And Josina Anderson later on in the day confirmed that. So I would suspect that they added 4 voidable years on this to make that cap hit for Odell Beckham Jr. in 2023 as low as possible, probably less than $4 million even when it comes to that. But we're talking about a guy that did not play a down of football last season, right? And played with 2 teams, obviously, in 2021, the Browns and, of course, the Rams, and tore up his knee in the Super Bowl and, that kind of thing. And he's 30 years old now, will be 31, I think, in November. Just looking at this on the surface, and look, he's a talented receiver, and 30 years old obviously isn't, ancient, but it is up to me. Long story short, I think they're going to regret this signing, but we'll see. And let the record show that they do need some wide receiver talent over there. I just wonder, if this is an overpay. If you brought him in for even half that money, it looks a lot better, I think. But man, $15 million, it sounds like guaranteed, and you're having to use the void years, which is more than likely going to create some dead money for you instantly in 2024. It just doesn't look great on paper. So it seems very un-Raven-like, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's a good way to frame it. Unraven, like typically not that super splashy free agency move that grabs all the headlines, but it sounds like that, what happened was Odell last night was supposed to go to New York to visit the Jets, and I'm betting there was a good chance he was going to ink a contract. Then if you sit down, talk to that guy for a couple hours, the two sides have been in contact at the owner meetings. The Jets, I believe, were at the workout that Beckham held also during the owner meetings. And so I think the Ravens said, we got one chance to get this guy. It's basically right now before he gets on a flight and lands, with the Jets brass. And so we got to really, overpay to make sure this guy stays. My next question, bouncing off of that, is, does the fact that Beckham Jr. signed in Baltimore, does that increase or kind of lock in the odds that Lamar Jackson becomes a Raven? Because if I'm Odell Beckham Jr., I'm not going to sign in Baltimore unless I have some sort of really strong feeling bordering on a guarantee that Lamar Jackson is going to be my quarterback, and I'm not catching passes from Tyler Huntley or some rookie come week 1.
Pro Bowler Tyler Huntley.
Pro Bowler. How could I forget? I hate that I had a terrible take a couple weeks ago. I don't think you should get Pro Bowl recognition in terms of like your player page and your bio if you're an alternate. It should only be for the actual first ballot Pro Bowl guys.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And look, later last night, on Instagram, on Lamar Jackson's Instagram page, those two obviously have had a conversation. Mm-hmm. According to that, you would think that, he's pretty confident that Lamar Jackson's going to be playing for the Baltimore Ravens in 2023. I think I stated right from the start that my gut, and look, how many times do you see franchise tag players end up, in another uniform? And look, we've gone far enough into the time process right now that you would think if he was going to get an offer sheet from another team, he'd have one. So now, to me, it becomes a matter of will they actually, will he play under the tag? Because you have until, the middle of July, right, where tag players have to sign a new deal, and if not, they have to play under the tag. So it'll be interesting, to watch the timeline between now and then. And obviously, you can go back to what happened with Le'Veon Bell and all, that sort of thing there. But I just, my gut all along tells me that they're going to work something out here.
Same, yeah, and to be clear, we both have been in the camp that we think Lamar would be a Raven, but I think obviously this signing would further that, and it'd be quiet some of the choppy waters based on, the comments that I think DaCosta made last week about, we're going to look at quarterbacks in the draft when asked about the Lamar situation. There was the whole kind of, firestorm over that. And so I think this just kind of takes it from, 90% likelihood that Lamar stays to like 98% likelihood that Lamar stays a Raven.
Yeah, I would agree there. And look, when this news came across, I didn't go, "Oh crap, this is bad news for the Steelers." In fact, a little wry smile, a little bit, because you agree, right? This is it feels un-Raven-like, this sort of move, especially with and I know why they had to use the voidable years, because they've got Lamar, tying up so much cap space for them. But man, and this is obviously a team that has had wide receiver issues in the past. It does feel like kind of like you stated there. We got to do something. He's about to sign to the Jets. We don't really have, we don't know what we're going to get in the draft. We got it wasn't Rashad Bateman kind of miffed not too long ago that he's not totally happy. It does feel like a kind of a desperate move on the part of the Ravens, and we'll obviously see how it plays out. I mean, you got a guy that hasn't played in the NFL since 2021, and once again, when we're talking about a talented guy in Odell Beckham Jr., but Father Time is undefeated. And look, the way his exit was in Cleveland, and now he does kind of it is a reunification with Todd Monken, right? Because weren't those two together in Cleveland?
I think for a year, right? Monken was the OC. I want to say, I don't remember the whole timeline, but yeah, I mean, he can be an impact player to a degree, but I mean, as you said, I saw the news, I was eating my Easter ham and I went, well, back to the ham. Like that's kind of how
you didn't put the fork down or anything,
yeah,
did you?
I didn't choke on my food or anything like that. And probably another reason why the price tag is so high is because this receiver class is not that impressive in the draft. That's why Chase Claypool went for such a pretty penny, because teams were mapping up for agency and the upcoming draft class and realizing it's not going to be that strong. I think Jim Nagy had a tweet. We have an article on the site that says only potentially one receiver will get taken in the first round later this month, and Jackson Smith-Njigba from Ohio State. Other guys, including Jordan Addison, not guaranteed, but could slip into the second round. So when you're dealing with a weaker draft class without the real top-heavy talent, and obviously free agency at this point is already dried up, it really creates that demand of the price tag is going to go up.
True or false? The Ravens will draft a receiver with one of their first 2 selections.
Still true. I don't think Beckham's going to change that so dramatically. And Bateman's a really good player, but has been injured his first 2 years. But yeah, somebody asked me the question on Twitter this morning: does Odell signing in Baltimore really increase the need for Pittsburgh to draft a corner at 17? And the answer is definitely no. If you draft a corner at 17, that's for Jamar Chase, not for Odell Beckham Jr.
There you go. You're right.
So. Yeah, that's the news there, but it is something to note. And as you said, Odell can still make a play or two, but not somebody that's keeping either of us up late at night. So that's the news on the Baltimore Ravens. We'll bring it back.
I guess Mike Tomlin would do that yawning again, right?
Even more so. He'd probably fall asleep like at this point, because like back then, Odell was still a pretty talented player. Today, it's like, well, yeah, you can fall asleep.
Now, of course, if Odell goes off on the Steelers in the first meeting, people will clip this portion out of the podcast, I'm sure, and have it saved. But I mean, look, our job is kind of look at things the way they are and kind of speculate from there. So I still don't feel overly worried about it.
Yeah, same here. All right, Dave, bring it back to Pittsburgh. Alex Highsmith, I know you had talked about this already a bit, but you had a post yesterday on Highsmith to kind of expand on what you talked about there on the podcast now.
Yeah, people don't like talking about cap. I have found over the course of the last year that people don't really care too much about the difference between cap and cash, or at least not as much as I do.
Well, to be fair,
or anywhere close. But I've kind of talked about, or I have talked about and written about cash spending and related to the CBA several weeks ago. And I finally got back around to, we just recently talked about the contract projection that I had for Alex Highsmith based on, what I feel the market is for him and how I think that will happen. I finally got around to writing about why specifically, people were saying, someone in that contract post that I did on Alex Highsmith said, why I think, want to know why I think there's a high probability of Highsmith being signed this offseason. Well, first and foremost, the Steelers like to keep good players, but that's not good enough of a reason. When you look at their cash spending overall, and the fortunate thing here right now is we are in the third year of the 3-year cycle with the CBA, where teams at the end of this 3-year cycle have to have had spent 90%, at least 90% of the total cap total for the 3 years in cash. And look, the Steelers entered this offseason already in good shape in relation to it. It's not like they were running into issues, especially the way the current the top 53 salaries are on the team after this initial rush of free agency here. It's not like the Steelers are in any situation where, oh man, how are they going to, in other words, they're going to meet the threshold of the 90% cash versus cap total very easily, regardless of what they do with Highsmith here. But I do think that as a whole, when you look at what the Steelers' plan is and really what teams around the league in general, they are strongly encouraged to spend. The league has to spend 100% of the cap in cash. I think is what it stipulates there. But individually, teams have to at least spend 90% of the cap in cash. Once again, when you look at where the Steelers are right now in their top 53, and then you look ahead at the draft class and what they're going to spend in cash there with signing bonuses. When you look at the cash outlay that's coming for the practice squad, when you look at what they're probably planning on spending in cash in 2023 in the way of IR, IR and practice squad elevations, you can boil this thing down to, and I did this in the post, that it looks like they've still got another, where is it specifically, another roughly around $16 to $17 million in cash that they could spend to get them to right at around 100% of the 3-year total in cash. And if indeed that's the case, that this team is looking to spend 100%, and if indeed 16 to 17 million more in cash is the outlook, a contract for Alex Highsmith fits perfectly within there, especially the way that I laid it out there in the contract proposal that I had for Alex Highsmith, I think last week there, where a first-year take for him in 2023, his new first-year take would be like $16.25 million. And he's already on the books right now for, 2.79 or 2.97, forget, 2.743 million. So you're talking about taking that cash outlay for him from 2.743 up to 16.25, hair over 13 million. That still gives you another couple $1 million to play with in cash that you could use on a guy, I don't know, like Bud Dupree for a signing bonus there, or however else you want to spend it. But I think I proved my point in this post of why I believe that there's a high probability that the Steelers get Alex or why the plan is to get Alex Highsmith signed to a contract extension later this summer, and why specifically I think the first year cash outlay of such a deal will be somewhere between 16 to 18 million.
So can you just, in summary, this move would get them to 100% of cash? Is that what you're saying?
It would get them fairly close to it, right?
Where are they at? Where are they at if they didn't do the deal? Like, where would they be above that 90% floor? I assume that.
Oh yeah, look, I mean, if they did nothing right now with Alex Highsmith for the 3-year span, they're well over the 90% mark.
Okay, gotcha.
But my theory is that their plan is to spend right around as close to 100% of the 3-year cap total in cash.
Have they done that in the past? Is there anything you look towards in past?
That's the historical problem with this, is because I just started looking at this, and having the luxury of the 2 previous years cash totals versus what I'm lucky in the fact that I'm starting to pay more attention in this now, because of, if this was year 2, it would make it a little bit more difficult to gauge, but we're in year 3, and I am under the assumption that they are going to try to do their part as one of the 32 teams to spend as close to 100% of the 3-year cap total in cash. So that's why it's a good year for me to pay more attention to it this time around. Now, when we get to next year, being the first year of the new 3-year CBA cycle, it's going to be a lot harder to predict, other than thinking that more than likely they're going to want to at least be around a 90% number there. But once again, maybe they keep low spending in year one, try to make it up a little bit more in year two, like they did this time around. And then you have the whole COVID thing involved as well, too.
Sure.
And how much did that impact this last 3-year cycle? So I guess what I'm saying is I'm fortunate that this is year 3, and then now I'm going to have to use this next three-year cycle as a study versus the last 3 years. However, when we get to the 3rd year of this next 3-year cycle, I should have a pretty good idea of predicting what they're going to do in cash spending.
Right, based off of this current 3-year cycle. I didn't know if you had looked back at old 3-year cycles from 2017 to 2019, whatever it was, and been able to compare if this seems more of a new.
Well, when did the new 3-year? When was the new CBA agreed to, though?
That's a good point too. Which was 2020, wasn't it 2020?
Right, it was 2020. Yeah. So this is the first 3-year cycle of that when it comes to the 90% rule of that.
That wasn't in the old CBA. That wasn't the 90% rule in the old one.
I don't think. I'll have to look back. I mean, there were spending rules, but the reasons they got changed is because players thought that teams weren't doing the job of spending the cash and related to the cap.
Okay, I just couldn't remember when that was instituted because I think there's been a spending floors for a while, I think, but I just don't know what those numbers were.
Right.
All right, so good information, and again, we'll wait this summer and see how it looks. And obviously,
where would you push back on what I have done?
Well, I don't really have the expertise or the knowledge or the research that you do with these numbers. I really can't. I guess what I would say twofold: A, if the team's already at 90% and they met that floor obligation, there really is there's nothing that says they need to be close to 100% individually.
Other than teams. And you would think that the Steelers would be doing their part in a 3-year span to spend 100% of the cap in cash.
Yeah, but I don't think they're going to assign a guy to an extension to do their part for the goodness of Roger Goodell and the NFL. They'll do a deal if the numbers make sense.
True. But within that, though, look, they're not going to go over just to get the deal done. But if they can work it into 100% model. Look, there's no guarantee any deal gets done, right? Because there's no full guarantee because he might be asking for the moon. There's guarantees, obviously, and team guarantees that the Steelers try to stick to if you're not Minka Fitzpatrick or TJ Watt. So there are factors involved that could prevent this deal to get done. I'm just looking at the big picture of them trying to stay within, a certain window. And I view the Steelers as a franchise that probably has it laid out that if at all possible, we're going to try to do our part of spending 100% of the cap in cash in a 3-year period. As are all teams, that should be the goal.
Right. In Pittsburgh, they want to be aggressive. They want to draft, develop, retain. So that's certainly, I think it's going to be a priority for them to want to re-sign Highsmith. The second fold of that twofold point was what you had just said. Obviously it takes two to tango, and Highsmith has to have a deal that works. And I'm sure he'll negotiate his camp well in good faith, but you never know if a deal can get done based on their demands. And could the market get reset with some sort of, who all was drafted in that? I know we talked about this last week, but who was part of that draft class that might get an extension now? Were there any besides Bosa? Any pass rushers in that draft? Chase Young,
I didn't
he's
look
been
back.
hurt.
I didn't look back. Isn't this the 5th-year option year for Chase? I mean,
yeah. I mean, obviously, some teams might try to get the extension done ahead of the 5th-year option, and I don't know about other names from before. Yeah, I'm not from that 2020 class. I'm not seeing in terms of the top here any top pass rushers that are due to get paid.
Right.
Big bucks here. So that may help kind of stabilize the market for a guy like Alex Highsmith. But again, still takes two to tango. And let's just say hypothetically that he really wants that second year fully guaranteed the way that Watt and Minka did, right or wrong. That could be a sticking point that could cause some issue with the deal.
I think once again, and we talked about this in the contract proposal that I put together for him. If there are guarantees past the first year, they're not going to be full guarantees. I don't think. I think they would be injury and skill related as to a portion of either the second year roster bonus or the second year base salary.
Sure, I'm with you, but I'm sure they're going to ask for it to start. If you're his camp, might as well ask for it and shoot for the moon or shoot for the stars and try to land on the moon. It's probably going to be their approach.
I just think when you look at the big picture of the way I presented it there, I think it's more than just a coincidence that first year cash total rise for Alex Highsmith fits almost perfectly into that number.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good way to look at it. Time will tell, how true that ends up being, but I would not be surprised if that's exactly the way that it's been laid out by Pittsburgh and the way it ultimately plays out later this summer.
And look, hopefully I did a good enough job in that post to explain the difference between cash and cap, because if you give a guy a signing bonus this year, let's take Larry Ogunjobi, for example. Even though his cap number obviously is a lot lower in 2023, whatever he earns in the way of a base salary or roster bonus or signing bonus given to him in 2023, that counts as a cash total for that particular year.
Right. Even though from a cap perspective, the signing bonus, for example, is spread out over the length of the contract.
Correct. So that's where a lot of people get hung up. Cash and cap are not the same.
Right. And that's a pretty important difference. It gets talked about occasionally, but not often, because there isn't a lot of knowledge about the difference and the importance between the two. But it is an important thing to look at, especially in regards to that 90% floor over that 3-year span.
Right. And that's why that post is not going to be very popular. And that's why this portion of the podcast is not going to be very popular, but it's the very nerdy type things that I like to do. And if I can create predictive aspects out of it, I'm going to do it.
We're nothing if not thorough around here. That is the Steelers Depot motto. All right. Something a little less thoroughly thought, I believe, is this, we'll call it rampant speculation that I think is really just nonsense to me. But this all stems from an Athletic article from about a week ago, and it's kind of been batted back up in the air occasionally. This was an article from Mike Sando, where NFL executives, anonymous, of course, would rate and rank and recap each team's offseason. And generally speaking, Pittsburgh got high marks for stability. And I think one GM or one executive, I should say, said this team made no mistakes. And then at some point in that article, there was, discussion about this team bringing in Isaac Seumalo and Nate Herbig, and some wasn't even a quote, but just written in the article that some, I guess had the idea, what is this team going to do with James Daniels? Could they try to trade him? Do these signings say anything negative about Daniels' play? And now that's turned into report says James Daniels might get traded, which is not what it said at all. It was just their own idle speculation. So to me, it's much ado about nothing. But I know you had an article on it over the weekend that kind of explains why this seems like, generally speaking, foolish nonsense.
Yeah, and look, I like Mike Sando. I think Mike Sando over the years has done a great job, and I do believe that he does have contacts around the league and NFL executives and all like that. But and then the article that we're referring to on The Athletic is not just about the Steelers. There's there's blurbs from 32 other teams of kind of, I guess, what he's hearing when it comes to these executives around the league, who obviously I don't think are no one's named in there for obvious reasons. But specifically, he wrote in there, adding 2 guards raised questions about the future of 2002 offseason addition James Daniels, who is scheduled to earn $8.25 million in salary. Daniels could remain at right guard with Seumalo at left guard and Herbig as a swing player, period. Some wondered if Daniels could be traded or released. Could center be his best position? Some wondered, is that one wondered? Is that 2 executives wondered? it's very vague, and leave it to the internet to run with it. So, on Saturday I was looking for something to write for, and there seemed to be a lot of people kind of discussing this, trying to treat it as a report, which obviously isn't.
Right.
I mean, this to me, my takeaway is that, in summation, that what Sando wrote shouldn't be considered any more than speculation at this point from whoever he talked to. And I think when you move forward, there's several reasons to think that this released seriously. I mean, unless this guy is a locker room cancer, which there's no evidence that he is.
He's not.
On or off the field. There's zero reason to speculate that he might be released. As far as him being potentially traded, I mean, we're talking about one of the team's top 2 offensive linemen last season. You're talking about a guy that, I mean, when's the last time that the Steelers signed a guy early in free agent to any kind of a sizable contract, and then a year later turned him loose? What was Steven Nelson?
I mean, that was part of the COVID, cap crunch too. So that was kind of some special.
Right.
He was what, two years in Pittsburgh, or was it just 1 year? No, it was 2 years before he got cut.
Right. So, I mean, even he, his situation, there's just nothing, and it's not like James Daniels is killing you against the cap. You look at his average yearly value of 8.3 or whatever, 8.83333. It's not overwhelming based on his play, and just considering the overall quality of the player that we're talking about here, the cap savings achieved via a cut or a trade don't seem that significant overall. So with that, Daniels would likely need to be dealt for, at least a 3rd round draft pick for the Steelers to achieve really any value in parting ways with him. And then once again, in doing so, you're kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face, because you're diminishing, the overall quality of the room. And then you're putting yourself in a position where you're going to rely heavily probably on a draft pick at that point. And the guard class overall in this, when you look at this class, isn't great. There's just nothing here to kind of justify strong speculation that he might be traded. So, look, I've learned over the years not to speak in absolutes when it comes to this kind of stuff, but as close as I can get to not doing that, I'll be absolutely stunned if James Daniels is traded here in the next couple of weeks. And look, there is a guard in that room that I could see being traded, and it's not James Daniels, it's Kevin Dotson. But none of this makes any sense, and I'd be interested to and we'll never find out, to find out who these actual executives are that Sando supposedly spoke to that think that James Daniels could be cut or traded.
I appreciate you laying out all the reasons why those things won't happen with Daniels. He won't get cut. He won't get traded. Frankly, though, I don't know if they deserve the breath. I mean, it's not going to happen. I think what you're seeing there in The Athletic was just idle speculation. Those guys, executives, talking out loud, just kind of going through the moves, just in the way that they think about those types of things. But there was no report. There was no, we're hearing that he's going to get traded, that we're fielding calls. There's none of that. And so, to me, it's much ado about nothing. It's the epitome of the offseason where there's not always a lot to write about. And so people are trying to take a very small part of a story and turn this into a big headline news for clicks. And I think
I was actually accused in the comments of this being clickbait. And here was my title: Addressing Speculation That Steelers OG James Daniels Might Get Traded or Released. Is
right.
that?
And then, no, it's not clickbait at all. I think that's literally as straightforward as it gets. We didn't, some people would say that there was a report he was getting traded, and that to me is certainly more clickbait. And of course, in the post, as you're laying out here, you're refuting why this is not a thing, not going to happen. But yeah, to me, it's all just much ado about nothing, wasted, energy overall, because he's going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler next year. He's going to be a starter. Where exactly is that going to be? Right guard, center, left guard? There's a conversation you can have about that, but he'll be a Steeler. He'll be starting come week 1.
And the reason I did write about it, because it was a Saturday and this thing started to grow legs all of a sudden because of this quote. So, I figured it'd be worth punching holes into.
Yeah, that's what we do. I mean, I'm glad to kind of, push back on that narrative because, yeah, it was just weird to see so many other outside places write about this in a very serious way, as in, oh my goodness, there have been reports that he might get traded or he might get cut or he's fallen out of favor. And it's just,
you mean like the Steelers trading for Hunter Renfrow?
Yeah, like that. I mean, again, this is just off-season fodder. I thought the more frustrating part was in that Athletic article, there were more interesting things said about the Steelers with quotes and about their offseason plans and the way they've gone about their business that we wrote about days ago before we saw that Daniels comment. And we decided not to even mention that or barely mention that and have the headline of that article be about the other stuff that was said by executives. But you know how this thing goes. One small comment gets amplified, turned into a bigger story, and all of a sudden it's a thing.
All right. We try to be as responsible as we can with these things.
Yeah, but I frankly just think it's nonsense. I think it's blown way out of proportion and just downright silly.
Okay, next topic.
All right, next on the list is our first what they look for study. Ooh. And so I wanted to start that off on this Monday, and I didn't know what position to begin with. I went cornerback, though, just given the high probability this team will draft a cornerback and draft one highly, and also hope Pittsburgh has not drafted a true cornerback in the last 3 years, unless you count Trey Norwood, and I consider him more of a safety. And so it's been a pretty long drought on that position, but that also means our criteria did not change. And I understand there's the caveat of Omar Khan, Andy Weidel, new scouting staff. You can't guarantee the past history for where they're going to be at towards the future, but all we can do is work off of the numbers that we have. Of course, Mike Tomlin, Art Rooney II, still the big decision makers. They have not changed. And so for now, we're going to keep our numbers the same. But using benchmarks basically on height, weight, arm length, 40 time, kind of the cutoff, the criteria needed. 2 players from this year's class who were at the combine. I'm only going off of guys who were actually at Indy. Otherwise, I'd spend eternity trying to find every single potential cornerback prospect. But of combine invite quarterbacks who checked every single box, there are 2. One is Julius Brents from Kansas State. The other, Corey Trice from Purdue. And so those were the 2. Pittsburgh showed interest in Brents, brought in for a pre-draft visit, top 40 type player. Trice viewed as kind of more of a sleeper, but I think, later-ish round guy. I think he could sneak into day 2, but maybe a day 3 type of guy. But Brents and Trice, the 2 guys who checked every box.
I have not watched Trice yet. Have you watched? How much of him have you watched? I
put on some tape last night because I'm going to do a profile on him. I think one game in, long, lean, press corner, a bit grabby, tight hipped. I thought he was more tight hipped, and some of the agility drills that he went through suggest he will tackle, he will come up and support the run, uses that length well, but yeah, just grabby and I think a little tight.
Okay. The unfortunate thing here, and I had a feeling we're going to start running into this more and more, that we talked about, after the combine and all, these guys not doing these short shuttle and 3-cone times sure is disappointing, because they're because, and you stated at the bottom of this post, if you're wondering, several top prospects like Christian Gonzalez, Joey Porter Jr. and Deontay Banks aren't listed there because none of them participated in the short shuttle or 3-cone even at their pro days.
Right, yeah. I'm expanding this to use pro day, which I typically was wary of in the past, but because almost no one does the shuttle drills at the combine, I'm even using pro days now. But yeah, Gonzalez, Porter, Banks, Ringo, Ringo did participate, but the other 3 did not do it. And so they just don't make it because of that lack of testing. They check every other box though.
Right. So when it comes to the Steelers, Omar Khan, especially when you talk about wide receivers specifically, he's been asked a couple of times and saying, well, we're not going to, I'm not going to reveal totally what we look for. But you would think some of that's metric related, right?
I think like every team, and probably even more so in the post-COVID era, they're going to have some more of those analytics and benchmarks. Yeah, I mean, teams will have, basically if you're, below a certain mark in a category, you're considered a historical outlier, and you may be off a board. Now, for some teams, that's more pronounced than others, and some teams, the Colts, for example, love those big, long corners. The same with Seattle. I don't know if Pittsburgh has so clearly a type over the yard running back. They like the really big power, 5'10", 220-plus pound backs. And so it can vary from team to team. But, yeah, our goal here is just to try to find benchmarks and minimums and cutoffs and see who fits best based off that criteria.
Do you think they have some sort of a number on, 3-cone and short shuttle on some of these guys?
It's hard to say for sure. It seems like their 3-cone and shuttle metrics, from what I've been able to gather, aren't that, what's the word? The standard is not super high. Even the guys that make some of the 3-cone times, they're not even historically all that good. They're just kind of like below average. And so there may be a number. I don't know if it's just hard and fast where they have 8 different boxes and you have to hit every single box. I don't think that's the case, but I'm just trying to use some historical data here, especially given the continuity of what Colbert and Tomlin had to try to, have some better predictive power for their future picks.
Well, look, I mean, these posts that you do over time have held water.
Yeah, and sometimes guys circle back, like LaRaven Clark was on my look for list when he came out, and all of a sudden he's a Steeler. So yeah, these things kind of, it's not 100% obviously, but sometimes they're cool to look at.
Is there anything? I guess it's hard to say. Do you think because so many of these top ones did not make the cut because they didn't, do a couple of the drills there, but of the ones that check the boxes outside of the 3-cone and the short shuttle, I guess what I'm getting is it's going to be somebody off this list.
Well,
if you had to bet
again, because those top guys,
it's not surprising that KY Blue Kelly showed up on there. I don't think.
Yeah, he barely missed on the 3-cone by a couple, I think, hundredths of a second. And so, he was very close. Riley Moss, they had a pro day dinner with him. He actually missed in length. He actually hit the 3-cone and the short shuttle, but just wasn't quite long enough. You look at Terrell Smith in Minnesota. I think Tom Meade likes him. I can't say for sure that one of these guys off the list will become a Steeler just because you have your Gonzalez's and Porters and Banks and those names that, just didn't qualify for consideration, but just something to look at and just kind of how we're starting.
Was Trice the most surprising one to show up on this?
Yeah, I think so, just because he's not considered that top name corner, but he's a big, again, a little bit lean, but he's got that size. And, generally speaking, if you're a real, RAS score kind of guy like Brents and Trice, you're going to make the list because your testing is so off the charts. But that's one name that we haven't talked about too much. I think he could be a sneaky candidate, again, in vogue in that big, long press corner. I think he is physical. He's kind of 1-year production guy, but the tape that I've seen so far, and I'm still working through his report, I can see the allure there.
And really, we don't have any data as far as nickel guys to go off of, right?
Yeah, I mean, the nickel guys are all part of that pile. And one issue with this is because I'm looking at cornerbacks broadly and not splitting them up into nickel versus outside due to sample size issues. And so generally, this team is drafted more outside corner than slot guys. But some of these guys could potentially kick inside. I don't know about Riley Moss if he could try to play inside the next level. So some of these guys might have some versatility.
And of course, I'm looking at one of the comments in here on the post: film over tape measures. Well, that's not the gist of what we're trying to do here.
We can do both.
We understand film is very, very important, without a doubt. But it's just, it's like me with the cash in the cap, trying to find anything that we can tie predictive measures to.
Yeah, it's not either or. It's yes and. We're doing both. There are times we look at tape, times you look at numbers. We try to put them together. Yeah, unfortunately, the comments on this have basically been that, and the Steelers suck at cornerbacks. Hopefully, they do something different. So that's kind of been the theme of the response to this, but that's okay. But yeah, we love tape. Listen, I have a profile today from a guy from Carroll College, NAIA Carroll College today. So if anyone wants a question if I love watching tape, I was watching, College of Idaho versus Carroll College over the weekend. So I think I'm pretty well versed.
Oh,
no, not even. They're not even the Vandals. This is College of Idaho, not even Idaho University. This is
potatoes.
Minor potatoes. So yeah, that is how I spent my weekend. So I love the tape as much as anybody.
Don't you let these people discourage you, Alex Kozora.
Thank you, Dave. I needed that pep talk today. But that is a study. What position?
You're good enough. You're smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like
don't
you.
Need no man. That's how I am. What position do you think we should do next? If you had to, what would you be most interested in after cornerback?
Tackle the tackles.
Tackle. I got to get back through because the sample size numbers have been historically tough because they just have not drafted many tackles. So I'll have to go back through those numbers. But I would love to do tackles. I want to do tackles because we know they're going to very likely to draft a tackle.
Is there any position that you're not going to do?
Not quarterback has a sample size issue, but not quarterback. That might be the only one. I'll try to get through the rest of them. I'll have to go back through and check though.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate that. I always look forward to this because look, I mean, once again, and the Raven Clark signing is the most recent of this, and it seems like every offseason we end up pointing out once or twice previous posts related to these studies here. So they do hold water, maybe not so much in the now as much as they might in the future.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. And again, under Omar Khan, Andy White, could things shift? Sure. And we'll keep an eye on it. And that's the intrigue and kind of the little bit of the darkness of the new draft season that we're all in right now. So, Dave, anything else you want to talk about that we did not touch upon?
What do you think about Jim Nagy coming out and what he said about the wide? I know we sort of hit on that a little bit, but what do you think about him saying one thing has become clear on calls around the league? Past couple weeks, NFL isn't nearly as high on this year's wide receiver class as the media. Frequently seeing 4 to 5 wideouts in mocks. Have spoken to numerous teams that have only one first round grade at the position. That guy is Jackson Smith in Jigba.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think, generally draft fans are spoiled by really good receiver classes because typically they are pretty strong at the top. And this year just is one of those exception years where you don't have that. And some people still want to put receivers in that top of the class when it's probably less than earned. And so, we'll have to see. Maybe some guys go late round one. There's Zay Flowers, there's Jordan Addison, there's Quentin Johnston, there is Smith and Jigba, as you and Nagy mentioned. But I think overall it is not there's some depth in this receiver class. I don't think it's top heavy. I think there's a lot of slot receiver type of guys like Addison, like Flowers, who can be good players, can be productive players. But to me, one of my draft philosophies is if you're drafting a wide receiver in the first round, your offense has to run through him. He has to be your number one type of guy that's going to really be this high volume, high impact kind of guy, not somebody who's going to catch, 70 passes for 970 yards and 5 touchdowns, even if he's going to be a good role niche player. That's just not going to justify a first round pick. You want that really high end guy that's going to be a top receiver who can go off for 150 yards in a game. So I don't know how many of those guys exist in this class.
Right. I would agree with you there. But when it comes to the Steelers specifically, it does play more in line with this team being able to get probably a decent quality player in the middle rounds.
Yeah, I think there's depth in this class. I think this team's looking at some of those slot receiver types, and I think a guy like Jonathan Mingo is going to go a bit higher than people think. But we've talked about Jaden Reed and maybe Charlie Jones from Purdue, and I think Josh Downs is going to be second round pick. But I'm a big fan of his game. So again, this receiver class has depth. It just is not. It's not that freaky top level guy. It's going to be a top 15 pick. It's just not.
All right. Before we get to some emails here, I wrote about 4 Steelers whose immediate futures could be impacted by draft results. What did you think about the list of 4, which include Akella Witherspoon, Kevin Dotson, Montravius Adams, and Gunnar Olszewski?
Yeah, I think you're right on the nose with all those names. I know you mentioned that Witherspoon is kind of the number one guy who might be looking over his shoulder because we can basically rubber stamp this team drafting a cornerback and drafting one early, and he's got the biggest salary against him of the four that you mentioned. And so now, are you saying that they could get cut shortly after the draft, like a John Bostic kind of thing, or just in terms of their week one roster spot being less and less secure?
I'm saying that if you were to build a list of 4 players that could see contract terminations not long after the draft, these 4 need to be on that list. Do I think all 4 of these are going to be out the door after the draft? No,
sure.
I don't. But I think Ahkello Witherspoon leads the list as far as probability goes. When it comes to possible players that could have their contracts terminated not long after the draft, we've had to talk. I don't think if Kevin Dotson survives this roster or survives the draft as far as not being traded, I think that increases his likelihood of at least sticking through greater part of the offseason and really potentially on into the 53 as well, too. I just think the draft is probably the most crucial time when it comes to Dotson's future with the Steelers, because that would, to me, seem like the most probable time to do something with him if you're going to deal him away. Once again, if he does survive the draft, however, there's obviously it could depend on if they do draft a true guard, right? And they have looked at a few of these guys here, but I don't think Kevin Dotson would be out the door 2 weeks later if he was not dealt, during the draft. You get into a lot grayer category there with guys like Montravius Adams and Gunnar Olszewski because of if they had higher salaries, then you could increase the probability in them. But we're not talking about either of these guys costing all that much. Now, if you want to look, could the draft impact their probability of making the 53-man roster later this summer? Absolutely. In fact, I mean, I don't know what you think about Gunnar Olszewski overall, but it seems like a lot of things have got to go in his favor from where I sit right now for him to be on the 53.
Yeah, he's probably outside looking in. I mean, the receiver room is not incredibly deep right now. We'll see how things look post-draft. You think one's going to get drafted. There's going to be some undrafted free agents undoubtedly brought in, and that's going to certainly muddy up the roster spot. I just don't know what the role is for this guy. I mean, unless he's going to try to go back to being return man, which is why he was signed in the first place last year, and of course lost that job pretty early into 2022. If he's not going to be that, then there really is not a role for him.
Right. And as far as Montravius Adams goes, we're already talking about a defensive line room that's not overly deep. Now, could that change here in a couple of weeks via the draft? It's possible. And, they obviously signed Braden Fehoko and all like that. But even Fajoko's signing, I don't think is immediately detrimental to Adams' immediate future.
Right. Those guys should both be able to stay and be carried through camp and, go from there.
People want to know why are you going to build a list like this and not put Kendrick Green on it? Well, Kendrick Green, it at least in my mind, and I'm sure yours as well too, it feels like a foregone conclusion that Kendrick Green's not going to make the 53-man roster this year, first and foremost. Second, he's still on a rookie contract, so that salary is not cumbersome at all here. So to think that Kendrick Green would be out the door immediately after the draft is over. I mean, if you're going to cut him, you'd cut him by now. I think there. So there's multiple reasons why Kendrick Green's not on this list, but none of it's related to us thinking that he has a chance to make the 53-man roster. See what I'm saying there? I mean, to me, why put a guy that's obviously not going to make the 53-man roster on this list unless you thought unequivocally that he was going to be cut 48 hours after the draft?
Yeah, this is a list of veterans who are making some sort of money that would save this team a bit of money if they were released, not for rookie contract guys. So to me, Green didn't even really qualify for the spirit of the article.
All right. What about your 4 Easter eggs on the roster? Did you want to cover that real quick?
Just real quick, little Easter theme article, and obviously these are all kind of dart throws. These are just maybe some hidden names on the roster who might have a path to make it if things fall correctly. I really think Dan Chisena could be one of those guys, considering Miles Boykin has not been re-signed. He could be after the draft, not ruling that out, but Chisena has that Boykin feel of a guy that's a good gunner, coverage guy, not going to offer much on special teams, not even the blocker that Boykin is and was, but I think he's a guy as that number 5, number 6 has a chance to make it because he's going to bring that coverage and special teams value. Duke Dawson, a cornerback, pedigree guy, former 2nd-round pick. He's played in the slot before, talked about the issues his team has at slot cornerback. Who's going to be that guy with Cam Sutton gone, Millette being a rundown guy? You know, Dawson has not played much football recently, but he's got some experience and he may get a shot this summer. Marjorie Harper, who's a long press corner, size, speed, athleticism. He's played special teams, some embraces that. Again, kind of a long shot here, but if Witherspoon were to get cut, that may open up some space there for Harper. And then even Ryan McCollum at center, because there is no backup center right now. He's got a bit of NFL experience, and this team likely to add. But, McCollum's a guy that you don't want to totally forget about when it comes to those backup 8th, 9th offensive linemen on this roster.
All right. I like it.
All right, Dave, let's get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
All right, this from Chris Warren, Dave and Alex. Mr. Kozora opened up an old wound during last Wednesday's podcast, talking about the Steelers letting Mike Hilton walk without having a plan to address the position. He says, my fear is that the team will again prioritize other needs above nickelback, such as wide receiver and edge depth. As a Notre Dame football fan, I am wondering if you have or might be willing to take a look at Tariq Bracy. He is flying under the radar, after having not gotten an invite to the combine. He's undersized at 5'10", 185 pounds, but the guy is physical and very similar to Mike Hilton in a number of ways. I know you all are extremely busy, but and this guy will likely be an undrafted free agent, but please keep him in mind. Okay, well, we will, and maybe that is a guy that ends up as an undrafted free agent there. I have not watched any of Bracy out of Notre Dame.
Yeah, I haven't either. I'm just pulling up his bio now, and I'll certainly take all those guys under consideration. 6 tackles for loss last year with a pick, a forced fumble. 5-year guy at Notre Dame. Okay, that sounds interesting. We'll check him out.
Do we have pro day stuff on him?
I can try to pull up here really quickly if I have an article that will give me the numbers. Sometimes there's a bit of a lag in terms of getting those numbers posted on the sites that I use. Let me see.
Does he have an RAS or anything? Or
I don't think so, but according to Draft Scout, he ran a 4.66 at 5'10", $182. That's not a great start. Other numbers were better: 38.5-inch vertical, 10.3 broad. Just showing some explosiveness, not that long speed, that kind of traditional corner, slot corner type role. I'll check them out.
Okay. Thank you for that email, Chris. Let's see here. Derek Dimmy writes in, I really enjoyed the Roundtable podcast. Looking forward to the next one. Wanted to get your thoughts on picking at 17. To me, it seems to be a bit awkward of a position in the draft for Pittsburgh this year based on team need and talent available. He says by pick 17, it is likely that top talent at positions of need for the Steelers will be gone. Names like Paris Johnson, Christian Gonzalez, Broderick Jones, and Devin Witherspoon, he says. And then he says there is a chance that Porter Jr. could still be there at 17, but not likely. Once those top guys are off the board, the next group of players that fit the needs of the Steelers are not projected to come off the board until later in round 1 or early in round 2. Guys like DeJuan Jones, Darnell Wright, Brian Brzee, Brian Branch, and many of the other cornerbacks and linebackers. He says, even you, Dave, has said many of these guys I like a lot better at 32 than 17. He's not wrong there. It feels like and that's me saying he's not wrong about me saying that, not that he's saying that that's not wrong. It feels like they need to hope someone falls, or they will be reaching for someone if they stay at pick 17. He wants our thoughts on that. He says, trading back in this draft looks really attractive to me this year. Thanks as always, fellas. I will hang up and listen to your answer. Hey, the thing about, once again, while I personally, because I do look, you go back to that walk the mock that Alex did several weeks ago, kind of got him in a precarious position there, didn't it, Alex? And
oh yeah,
you fast forward all these weeks since you did that, and being as there's, I mean, look, it's easy to connect the dots to Joey Porter Jr. Of anyone right now, I feel, when it comes to 17 overall. But what if Porter's off the board? What if, the top tackles are off the board here? What if Christian Gonzalez and Witherspoon, are off the board here? Could they get in a position where it does feel like whoever, if they did stay at 17, that instantly the analyzing of that's going to be, well, that's a guy they probably could have gotten at 32.
Probably. I think Pittsburgh's in a really unique situation. I think just picking 17 overall is kind of a tough spot. It's literally the middle spot of the draft, essentially. And then also when you have that 32nd pick, you're trying to justify, is he a guy worth at 17 or 32? If you like him at 32, do you like him enough at 17? There's not a lot of separation there, but it's still first round versus second round, headline name of your class versus not the headline name of your class. And so it's kind of a fine line to walk. And so it's a good question. And you do wonder about, is Pittsburgh going to get stuck? I think so far this draft cycle has been and will be much harder to predict and project what this team will do at 17 than it has been in the first round for the last 3-4, plus seasons. I think to the point about trading down, does that increase those odds? I understand that case. I would argue the other side and say, does it argue the case to go up and go get one of those top tier guys instead, knowing that they may not be there at 17? But I think it's a really interesting spot Pittsburgh's in right now.
Is there any, and look, it's not like you just push a button either to get these trades done. And,
sure,
and,
of course.
And if it's not looking appetizing to you at 17, what makes it appetizing to another team, right?
Yeah, but unless you're giving them capital that they can get some depth in the second round, and something like that may be the reason.
Is there any one player that you feel good about being on the board at 17 that has you excited about potentially being the 17th pick of the Steelers?
In terms of guys, where
you just think, oh yeah,
I'm the Kool-Aid man.
Oh yeah, no, that's Randy Macho Man.
Yeah, I don't know. It's Kool-Aid man. When you watch it. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if there is that guy. I think I have struggled to find that name that I really, faithfully think will be there at 17 that I really, really like. And I would like, that's the guy I really want at 17. I don't know if there is that name for me right now. At least I have to think about it some more, but it's harder to find that guy.
I agree. And once again, I don't know if it's going to happen. And very rarely do I have strong thoughts either way about trading up or trading down when it comes to the Steelers, especially in the first round. But I really have found myself a lot of times thinking, man, I sure hope this team can manage to trade down a couple spots from 17.
Let me flip it, though. And you talked about who wants to come down to 17. Who's going to want to come up to 17 if there isn't that guy there? It's not going to be a quarterback there and a receiver, tackle. I mean, those kinds of things I'm not quite sure. So I think it goes
I agree. And that's a great pushback to it. You're wishing to move down. Well, what makes you think any team's going to want to come up? I agree. With that.
So we'll see. I think it's a really interesting spot that Omar Khan is in for his first draft.
Taylor Carpenter writes in, Dave and Alex, your excellent draft roundtable discussion last week got me thinking about the Steelers draft room and how Omar Khan, Art Rooney II, and Mike Tomlin together make the decision on what player to draft. He says, I know many other franchises take more of a one-person general manager approach to selecting players, unlike the Steelers, who appear to use more of a three-headed approach. He says, do you think the Steelers having so many cooks in the draft kitchen is a good or bad approach compared to to having just one person primarily calling the shots. He says it kind of makes me wonder if having three people making draft decisions like the Steelers do it would lend itself to not following the draft board as much as one shot caller approach, because Mike Tomlin really likes this guy or Art Rooney really thinks they need a certain position in this round, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts? Do you think it's common practice for an owner to be so involved in draft selections? Taylor in Athens, Ohio. Taylor, my first reaction to reading your email would be, we don't know exactly what happens in that draft room. It's fun to speculate on the outside and based on this report and that report, but do we really know that there's not one person that pulls the trigger on this?
Well, we know that there are three decision makers involved: GM, head coach, and owner. This team has said that over the years.
But how's it weighted?
Well, sure. I mean, obviously, I understand that, and I think Art Rooney has more of an influence in terms of first-round picks, general direction of the team, than people think. Maybe less so in terms of particular players, but in terms of overall, if he wants the run game improved, Najee Harris gets drafted, like those types of things. But I'll take Pittsburgh at their word that it is a consensus thing, and it's not a Jerry Jones, Dallas, or Jim Irsay. They can kind of wildly swing how this thing will go. I think having more people reduces the chances of somebody going off board, because it is more of a group thing. Consensus. This was built by a group. We're going to stay with it. There are times, even in Pittsburgh, where they have not followed their draft board to the letter. Jason Worlds over Sean Lee is a great example of that from years ago. That was a Tomlin type pick. But I think I'm losing my train of thought here.
Look. Here's the thing. You're building the draft board, right? And all that gets worked out way ahead of the draft. In fact, Omar Khan, I imagine, is going to be meeting the media here pretty soon. Probably him. I don't know if it's going to be him and Tomlin or not. I don't know, but he will meet the media soon and talk about how we're in the final stages of putting our draft board together, yada, yada. Andy Weidl's playing a part in that, yada, yada. I would like to hope to think that the way you have that draft board built is that if this player's gone, if these top 4 players are gone, or these top 10 or 12 or however many is on your list of players there, that you're saying, okay, if these 11 are gone and 12 is on the board there, that's the guy we're picking. And it doesn't come down to, well, we talked about, what do you think? It becomes a fantasy draft situation, where where people start lobbying and banging the table, type situation there. I would like to think that's the way it goes. And if it doesn't, then why the hell do you even have a draft board set up in there? So I would like to think that they are indeed trusting their board, and it gets to the point where Omar Khan's about saying, write up the card for this player, and then slowly turning to the side to look at Art Rooney II, make sure he's nodding, or you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Just unimaginable stuff that we've never seen because we're not in the room. You know what I'm saying? That kind of thing. So, I guess what I'm saying, Taylor, is my other pushback would be is, why the hell do you even have a draft board if you're not going to follow it, especially in the first round?
I get that, and I think certainly you want the draft board as really solid structure that you're leaning on as your primary driver, but there's got to be other considerations too in terms of position and depth of a draft class, and those things have to be, I think, factored into your draft board. As the
draft goes.
But even in the first round, I think has those considerations. Yeah, but
wouldn't that consideration be figured out in the setting of the board?
Well, if you set your board based off of talent and not based off of depth of classes, then...
Well, they always tell us they don't draft off of need. Need,
sure. But
even though that's not true.
Yeah, they don't draft off of it. How do they set their board though? They set their board off. I mean, and I think Weidl has a different
what
system.
I'm getting at some point, these room conversations of the three-headed monster have to be solved at hopefully ahead of the draft.
Largely, yeah. But I think even as you're getting on the clock and names come off, I mean, you're always talking. There's always a conversation with trade offers and what boards look like. And I mean, it's never, I don't think you sit there in silence and, your turn's on the clock and you just, solemnly walk up and take the top name off of the board and write the card down. I don't know if that's how their process is. I mean, it's hard to say.
Then why have a numbered board?
Well, I think it provides a good baseline structure. You don't want to have just chaos, but I think Pittsburgh has shown in the past they've not always taken the literal top player on their board. I mean, do we really believe that Artie Burns was truly the top player on their board when they took him way back when?
God, I hope not.
I hope not too. I think that was, position. To me, it's always where need and value intersect at the highest point is how they end up actually operating. But yeah, I think the draft board certainly creates structure. It's certainly the driver. But are there going to be times where they maybe stray from that a little bit? Not that they're going to pick the 20th player down on their board because of the need, but if it's two players that are really, really close, you're going to probably take the guy that's the more position in need or doesn't have quite the strong draft class behind him in terms of that group. I think those things are always in consideration.
Write that question down. We're going to hit Dick LeBeau up first. I would imagine. I mean, Dick's been in enough of the Steelers draft rooms during the draft, right? He's not out on the golf course.
I would certainly hope he'd be involved with those types of things. So, yeah.
Make sure we ask a question related to that when we have Dick LeBeau on.
Yeah, and for those wondering, we're hopefully, and I think we will at some point soon, have an interview with Dick LeBeau, which is like a bucket list item for, I think, both of us.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Good question, Taylor. Let's see here. One last one from Tito writes in, as of today, I'd be surprised if the Steelers' first 3 picks wasn't a combo of tackle, interior offensive line, defensive tackle, defensive end, or cornerback. Would you bet on that or the field? So he's saying he'd be surprised if the Steelers' first 3 picks weren't a combination of tackle, interior offensive line, defensive tackle, defensive end, cornerback. I could foresee a wide receiver somehow getting wedged in there. I think 2 of the 3 will definitely come out of those position groups. But would you bet your house that all three, the first 3 picks were not some sort of combination of those 5 positions?
Yeah, receiver's kind of the wild card. I just think about what's going to be the surprise of the draft. The draft never goes exactly how we think and expect it's going to occur, even if we feel like we're pretty dialed in on the team needs overall. There's always something that comes up, especially for a first-year GM in Khan, and maybe some new systems and new philosophies under him, Weidel, the new scouting staff, Sheldon White, Mark Sadowski, new promotions, Dan Colbert, Dave Pettit, et cetera. So you just don't know what you don't know. And so you just wonder about, that tight end or that, edge rusher or safety or whatever the case is that may come up and surprise you a little bit.
All right. One last one I lied to you. Gary Veneer writes in, and I know Gary's been a listener and reader for a long time. You're absolutely correct regarding state, provincial income tax obligations of both athletes and entertainers. This goes back to the signing bonus question that we had the other day. They are subject to the individual tax obligations based upon the location of the services rendered. This would also apply to individuals who perform consulting services. On the other hand, what is not well known is that according to tax principles, teams can and do depreciate their assets, including the salaries of players who are considered assets. Also, one nagging question I have been meaning to ask, why is spiking the ball by quarterbacks not considered intentional grounding? He says, I can't wait to walk the dog tomorrow and listen to the draft extravaganza you will post on Friday, this past Friday, April the 7th. Best sportscast podcast ever. You guys need to win an award. And the Grammy for Best Steelers Podcast goes to... okay. I don't think we have to worry about that. But I could see Alex up there making an acceptance speech there.
Oh, God, no. No, thank you. Let me put you up in front of a bunch of people, Dave, and let you talk.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I could do it. I'd ramble, but I could do it. I'd go over. They'd be playing
the music, yeah.
Yeah, playing the music to get me off there. But, all right. Appreciate the input there, Gary. How
do you depreciate an asset of a player? How does that?
I don't know.
How do you come up with that?
I don't know. I have had, I said this the other day, I've had an accountant for a long time. So I don't have to think. And you would think as much as I like the numbers and the cap and all like that, oh man, I dread tax time, and I don't even have to do my own taxes, and I dread tax time. So, I guess it's all what it's relative to. But why is spiking the ball by quarterbacks not considered intentional grounding? I guess because the intention is to spike the ball.
To give the nerdy answer, there is a carve out in the rule book that allows for spiking of the football. I don't know the exact language, but there's basically something that says, intentional grounding is this, except for in this spike case, that is allowed. So there actually is a provision.
I think he knows that, right? I think he's just kind of having some fun there.
But for those wondering, that there was a carve out.
Gary, thanks for the email there. All right, Alex, we're about an hour and a half in here, so perfect time to wrap this up. Anything else to add? Any late breaking news or anything coming in?
No breaking news. I'll have my next to last mock draft go up tomorrow on the site, and so we can recap that for Wednesday and hopefully have some more what they look for studies and some other. I got some draft study plans coming up here. There's one I'm really interested to do more research in about trades that I really want to kind of sink my teeth into before draft day comes.
All right, you can read all that on SteelersDepot.com, and let's see here. You can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, go to SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, go to SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button upper right navigational bar. We moved servers. We have upgraded servers, and hopefully they seem to be running well on our end. And thank you for the support over the years that have allowed us to reach another level here when it comes to this. And we are constantly trying to make the site better. We got some things happening this week behind the scenes to try to make things run even better ahead of the draft. We wanted to get this done weeks ahead of the draft for obvious reasons, to make sure we handle the crush of the draft traffic. So if the site seems to be loading a little bit faster, which hopefully it is for you, there's a reason behind it. So thank you for making that all possible. And in the meantime, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.